The first time I saw Marcus Webb, I thought he was broken. Not metaphorically, literally, physically broken. Like someone had assembled a sentient being from spare parts and forgotten to include the good ones. He stumbled off the transport vessel with all the grace of a drunken Borrelian slug, his pale skin already glistening with sweat under our station's standard lighting. Standard? The kind that every species from here to the Andromeda Fringe tolerates without complaint. But this human, he squinted like we'd pointed a solar array directly at his face. My name is Karvoth, Senior Combat Instructor at the Galactic Defense Initiative's training facility on Station Apex 9. I've trained warriors from 473 different species over my 30-year career. I've seen recruits with exoskeletons that could deflect plasma rounds, cadets with 17 eyes offering 360-degree vision, and trainees whose very biology allowed them to survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. And then there was Marcus Webb, human, from a backwater planet called Earth that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 6 months ago. Instructor Karavut, he said, extending one of his bizarre 5-fingered appendages toward me. I'm Marcus. Looking forward to training with you. I stared at the offered hand. My species, the Krithani, don't have hands. We have manipulation tentacles, 14 of them, each capable of independent cognitive processing. This human expected me to, what? Grab his hand with one of my thinking limbs. The absurdity would have been hilarious if it wasn't so sad. Follow me, I said, ignoring the gesture. He dropped his hand, a slight coloring appearing on his cheeks. Embarrassment. I'd later learn. Humans leak emotion through their skin pigmentation. Ridiculous. The other recruits were already assembled in the main hall. 47 of the galaxy's finest specimens representing the best their worlds had to offer. There was Thornik, a Grecian, whose mineral-based body could literally absorb and redistribute kinetic energy. Beside him stood Vela 3, a Syntherian whose reaction time operated in microseconds. And there, in the back, lurked Husraka, a Vorthokine predator, whose species had dominated their planet's food chain for 3 million years. They all turned when Marcus entered. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then someone laughed. That's the human? Vela 3's optical sensors flickered with what I recognized as amusement. Command sent us a human. Look at it, Thornik rumbled, his rocky frame shaking with mirth. It doesn't even have proper armor plating. Just skin. Thin, fragile skin. Husraka's triple-jawed mouth curled into what might have been a smile if it wasn't so terrifying. I've eaten tougher prey than that on my homeworld. For breakfast, Marcus stood there taking it all in. His jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Smart, I thought. Or maybe just scared. With humans it was impossible to tell. Silence. I bellowed, my vocal sacs inflating to full volume. The hall went quiet. This is Marcus Webb, and whether you like it or not, he's part of this training cohort. You will treat him as you would any other recruit. But sir, Vela 3 protested, humans are statistically the weakest species to ever attempt GDI training. Their bone density is laughable, their muscle fiber composition is inefficient, and don't even get me started on their sensory limitations. They can barely see into the infrared spectrum. How is he supposed to compete? Valid questions. Annoying, but valid. I'd read Marcus Webb's file during the transport delay. Humans were indeed underwhelming. They couldn't breathe methane like the Korthalians, couldn't regenerate like the Nixari, couldn't even echolocate like the blind force. They required specific temperature ranges, specific atmospheric compositions, specific everything. Evolution had apparently decided to make them the galactic equivalent of a participation trophy. Combat assessment begins at dawn cycle. Announced. You'll be divided into pairs for sparring exercises. Standard rules. No lethal force, no permanent maiming, and absolutely no eating your opponent. I directed that last part at Husraka, who looked mildly disappointed. The recruits dispersed, but I noticed the looks they threw Marcus's way. Pity. Contempt. Amusement. I'd seen those looks before, usually directed at recruits who washed out within the first week. Instructor? Marcus approached me after the others had left. I know what they're thinking. I know what you're probably thinking too. Do you? I kept my voice neutral. That I'm weak. That I don't belong here, that my species is soft. He met my gaze without flinching. Interesting. Most species found direct eye contact with a Krithani unsettling. Our pupilless black eyes tend to unnerve people. And maybe that's all true, but I didn't travel 47 light years to quit on day one. Noble sentiment, I replied. Nobility doesn't stop plasma bolts. No, he agreed. But determination might help me dodge them. I almost laughed. Almost. Get some rest, recruit. Tomorrow you'll need it. He nodded and headed toward the barracks, his gait still awkward in our station's slightly higher gravity. I watched him go, already calculating how many days he'd last. 3, 4 if he was particularly stubborn. I gave him a week, maximum. Dawn cycle arrived with its usual efficiency. The training arena was a marvel of modern technology, capable of simulating everything from zero-gravity combat to fighting in corrosive atmospheres. Today, however, we'd start simple, hand-to-hand combat, or tentacle-to-claw, or whatever appendage each species used. Pairs, I called out. You'll be matched against opponents of similar weight class and density. I watched as the recruits sized each other up, already forming alliances and rivalries. Thornik was matched with another heavy-class recruit, a Dorsalian tank. Vela 3 drew a quick reflex Starling. Asraka faced off against a fellow predator species. And Marcus Webb, you're with Kreeg. Kreeg was a Moltarian, a species known for their hydraulic muscle systems and impressive strength-to-weight ratio. Not the biggest recruit, but definitely capable of crushing a human without breaking a sweat. If Moltarians sweated, they didn't. Marcus took his position across from Kreeg, who looked down at the human with something resembling confusion. Instructor. Kreeg clicked in his native language, which my translator implant rendered into standard Galactic Common. I don't want to hurt him. He looks like he might break. The human accepted the risk when he enrolled. I responded. Begin when ready. The other matches started first. Thornik and his opponent crashed together like asteroids, the impact reverberating through the arena floor. Vela 3 moved in a blur, her strikes so fast they created sonic distortions in the air. Kuzrika fought with savage precision, each movement calculated to maim. And then there was Marcus. Kreeg advanced slowly, almost apologetically. He reached out with one massive arm, probably intending to simply push the human down and end this farce quickly. Marcus moved. Not quickly. Not by Vela 3 standards, but efficiently. He sidestepped Kreeg's grasp, and before the Moltarian could adjust, Marcus had somehow gotten behind him. The human's leg swept out, striking the back of Kreeg's knee joint. The Moltarian stumbled. Just slightly, just for a moment, but he stumbled. What the? I heard Vela 3 pause her own match to watch. Kreeg spun. Faster now. More serious. He lunged forward with both arms extended. Marcus ducked under the attack, his body moving with a fluidity I hadn't expected. As Kreeg overextended, the human drove his elbow into the Moltarian's side, right where two of his protective plates met. Kreeg grunted in pain. Actual pain. Lucky shot, Thornik called out, though he'd also stopped to watch. But luck didn't explain what happened next. Kreeg, now genuinely trying, launched a combination of strikes that should have overwhelmed the human. Any normal recruit facing that onslaught would have either blocked, retreated, or been flattened. Marcus did none of those things. He weaved. That's the only word for it. His body seemed to flow around Kreeg's attacks like water around stone, never quite where the strikes expected him to be. And every time Kreeg overcommitted, Marcus was there with a counter, a strike to the nerve cluster, a kick to the joint, a palm to the sensory organ. None of the hits were powerful. Aggression wouldn't have even felt them. But Kreeg wasn't aggression. And Marcus, somehow, seemed to know exactly where to hit to make it count. The match ended when Kreeg, frustrated and off balance, walked straight into a sweep that sent him crashing to the mat. Marcus immediately stepped back, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. Yield? He asked. Kreeg stared up at him from the floor, his translucent skin flushing with what I recognized as embarrassment. Yield, he muttered. The arena had gone silent. 46 recruits and one instructor, all staring at the human who shouldn't have won, who couldn't have won, who by every statistical measure and biological assessment had no business still standing. Marcus helped Kreeg to his feet. The Moltarian accepted the gesture, looking dazed. How did you? Kreeg started. You telegraph your punches, Marcus said simply. You drop your left shoulder before you strike, and you favor your right leg, probably an old injury. Once I figured out your pattern, it was just a matter of timing. Just a matter of timing. As if combat was that simple. Everyone, resume your matches. I barked, unwilling to let this moment define the entire session. The recruits obeyed, but the atmosphere had changed. They kept glancing at Marcus, at the human who had just toppled someone twice his size. I approached the human as the session continued. Explain, sir, that technique, that fighting style. Explain it. Marcus shrugged. A gesture I'd learned indicated uncertainty or modesty among his kind. It's just basic martial arts, sir. My grandfather taught me when I was young. Jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, a bit of boxing. He said the best way to beat a bigger opponent was to use their size against them. And the analysis. Identifying Kreeg's weaknesses mid-combat, pattern recognition, sir. Humans are good at that. We're persistence predators back on Earth. We evolved to track prey over long distances, reading their behavior, exploiting their mistakes. He paused. We might not be the strongest or the fastest, but we're pretty good at figuring out how things work. Persistence predators. I'd glossed over that part of the human biology file. Their ancient ancestors hunted by literally chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. What kind of insane evolutionary pressure created a species that won through sheer stubborn refusal to give up? Don't get overconfident, recruit. I warned. Physical combat is only one aspect of GDI training. Understood, sir, but as I watched him return to the training grounds, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, I'd underestimated this species. Over the next few days, Marcus continued to surprise us. Not by being the best at anything. He wasn't. Gala 3 was faster. Thornik was stronger. Yes, Rocco was more lethal. But Marcus had something else. Something that didn't show up on biological scans or genetic assessments. He had adaptability. When we ran zero-gravity combat drills, most recruits struggled with the disorientation. Marcus treated it like a puzzle, experimenting with different movement techniques until he found what worked. When we introduced weapons training, he studied each alien armament with intense focus, asking questions that revealed a tactical mind I hadn't anticipated. Why does the plasma rifle have that curve in the barrel? He asked during one session. Magnetic field stabilization, I explained, keeps the plasma contained during discharge. So if the magnetic coils were damaged, the weapon would become unstable, dangerously so. It would likely explode. He nodded, filing that information away. I could practically see his brain categorizing potential weaknesses, tactical applications, strategic possibilities. The other recruits noticed too. The mockery faded, replaced by weariness. Then, grudgingly, respect. The human is strange. Villa 3 commented one evening after training. He learns faster than his biology should allow. Humans have this thing called neuroplasticity, Marcus had explained when I asked him about it. Our brains are really good at forming new connections, learning new skills. It's why we can adapt to pretty much any environment, given enough time. Time. Always about time with humans. They weren't built for instant success. They were built for the long game. But the real test came on day 7. The combat scenario simulator was our most challenging training tool. It created fully immersive tactical situations, complete with environmental hazards, enemy combatants, and impossible odds. The goal wasn't to win. The goal was to survive long enough to learn. Most recruits lasted 3 to 5 minutes their first time. Today's scenario, hostage extraction. I announced, you'll be inserted into a hostile environment with limited intel and must extract 3 civilian targets while under fire from enemy forces. You'll face this alone. The recruits exchanged nervous glances. Solo scenarios were brutal. Webb, you're first. Because of course he was. I needed to see what this human was really capable of. Marcus entered the simulator without hesitation. The door sealed behind him and I activated the program. The scenario loaded. A war-torn urban environment, buildings collapse, smoke everywhere. Visibility was terrible. Somewhere in that chaos were 3 holographic civilians. And somewhere else were 24 enemy combatants programmed with advanced tactical AI. I watched through the observation screens as Marcus materialized in the center of the destruction. He immediately dropped to a crouch, scanning his surroundings. Smart. Standing targets died first. His weapon was a standard-issue pulse rifle. Nothing special. He checked the charge, examined the sights, and then did something unexpected. He closed his eyes. What is he doing? Villa 3 asked, watching alongside me. Listening. I realized. In the simulator, sounds had directional accuracy. The crack of distant weapons fire, the hum of enemy shield generators, the whimpers of frightened civilians. Most recruits relied on visual scanning, but in this environment with smoke and debris obscuring sightlines, that was inefficient. Marcus moved like a ghost through the rubble, his steps careful and deliberate. He wasn't fast, but he was quiet. Unnervingly quiet. Every movement seemed calculated to minimize noise, to avoid detection. He found the first civilian hiding in a collapsed building. Instead of immediately escorting them to the extraction point, he handed them his sidearm. If something happens to me, run east, I heard him say through the audio feed. Don't look back. Then he continued searching. 2 enemy combatants appeared around a corner. Marcus dropped behind cover before they spotted him. He could have engaged, taken them out. Instead, he waited, patient, watching their patrol pattern. When they moved past, he slipped behind them, continuing his search. He's avoiding combat, Thornick observed. Is that cowardice? That's efficiency, I corrected. Every shot fired gives away his position. He's operating behind enemy lines. Stealth is survival. Marcus found the second civilian, then the third. He gathered them in a relatively secure location and finally assessed the tactical situation. 3 civilians, 1 soldier, and a city full of enemies between them and the extraction point. Most recruits would have tried to fight their way through. Marcus did something different. He created a distraction. Using the rifle's power cell, he rigged an improvised explosive on the opposite side of the combat zone. When it detonated, the enemy AI did exactly what it was programmed to do: investigate the threat. And while they rushed toward the explosion, Marcus led the civilians along a parallel route, moving quickly but carefully through the chaos. They almost made it. An enemy patrol spotted them 50 meters from extraction. Marcus placed himself between the enemies and the civilians, laid down suppressing fire, and screamed, "Run!" The civilians sprinted for the extraction point. Marcus held position, trading shots with superior numbers. He took a hit to the shoulder, then another to the leg. The simulation's pain receptors made sure he felt every wound, but he didn't retreat, didn't fall back. He stood there bleeding, buying time with his body. The civilians reached extraction. Mission complete. Only then did Marcus try to withdraw. He managed 4 steps before enemy fire overwhelmed him. The simulation ended with his avatar collapsing in the rubble, technically killed but having completed the objective. Time survived. 11 minutes, 43 seconds. All 3 civilians extracted. I ended the simulation and entered the chamber. Marcus was on his knees, breathing hard, the phantom pain still registering in his nervous system. "On your feet, recruit," I ordered. He stood, wavering slightly. 11 minutes, I said. "The second best time recorded this year." His eyes widened. "Second best, sir?" A Nexari regenerator managed 12 minutes, but he had the advantage of regrowing limbs mid-combat. I studied the human carefully. "You sacrificed yourself for holographic civilians." "The mission was extraction, sir. I extracted them. You died in the process, but they lived." He met my gaze again, that same unsettling directness. "Isn't that what soldiers do? Protect those who can't protect themselves?" Around us, the other recruits had gathered. They'd watched the whole thing. They'd seen this supposedly weak, fragile human take damage that would have incapacitated most species and keep fighting anyway. "Humans feel pain the same way we do, right?" Kreeg asked quietly. "Worse," Fella 3 answered, having apparently researched the topic. "Their pain receptors are actually more sensitive than average, and they don't have our rapid healing or redundant nervous systems. When they get hurt, they stay hurt." "Then why?" Saraka's question trailed off, but we all understood it. Why would a species that felt pain more acutely, that healed more slowly, that was physically weaker than almost everyone else, why would they stand and fight when retreat was an option? Marcus swayed on his feet, the simulator's effects still draining him. But he smiled. Actually smiled. Because someone has to, right? And that's when I understood. We'd all been evaluating Marcus Webb through the wrong lens. We'd been measuring him by strength, speed, durability, all the physical metrics that didn't matter. We'd missed what made humans dangerous. They were absolutely, certifiably insane. I'll stop here, as requested. This is part 1 of your HFY story, coming in at approximately 2,000 words. Let me know when you'd like me to write part 2 to complete the story. The weeks that followed changed everything, not just for Marcus, but for all of us. Because once you see a human refuse to quit, refuse to break, refuse to acknowledge the basic logic that says weaker things should surrender to stronger ones, well, it makes you question a lot of assumptions. Training intensified. Instructor Vekran, my colleague who specialized in tactical operations, introduced hostile environment survival scenarios. We're talking environments that would kill most species in minutes. Acid rain atmospheres, sub-zero temperatures, radiation zones that scrambled DNA like breakfast eggs. Marcus prepared for each one with methodical precision. While other recruits relied on their natural resistances, he studied the gear, memorized the procedures, and practiced emergency protocols until they became muscle memory. Why does he practice the emergency oxygen switch so many times? Vekran asked me during one session. Surely once is enough. He's making it automatic, I explained, finally understanding the human approach. So when his brain is oxygen deprived and panicking, his hands will still know what to do. Vekran's antenna twitched with confusion. But why would his brain panic? Is he not trained? His species evolved with fear responses that trigger during crisis. Adrenaline, cortisol, the whole chemical cocktail. It's supposed to be a survival mechanism, but it can also cloud judgment. That sounds like a design flaw. Or, I said slowly, watching Marcus run through the procedure for the 40th time. It's a feature. The fear keeps them alert, and the training overrides the fear. The acid rain scenario proved my theory. We lost 3 recruits in the first 2 minutes. Not killed, obviously, but their suits breached and the simulation auto-extracted them as casualties. Their species had never evolved to deal with corrosive atmospheres, and panic made them sloppy. Marcus moved through the toxic downpour like he'd been born in it. Every seal checked, every step deliberate, every decision calculated against risk. When his glove tore on jagged metal, he didn't freeze, he didn't panic. He calmly applied the emergency sealant while standing in rainfall that could dissolve flesh in seconds. Is he not afraid? Thornick asked, watching the feed. Oh, he's terrified, I said, noting Marcus's elevated heart rate on the biometric display. Look at his vitals. His stress hormones are off the chart. But he's doing it anyway. That became the pattern. Marcus was always afraid. His biology made sure of that. But he'd learned to function through the fear, to let it sharpen his focus rather than break his resolve. It was perhaps the most alien thing about humans. We had species that felt no fear at all. We had species with danger responses that made them faster, stronger, more efficient. But humans, their fear response was objectively counterproductive. It made them shake, made their hearts race inefficiently, made their thinking fuzzy, and they fought anyway. I don't understand your species, Delao 3 said to Marcus one evening in the recreation area. Most of the recruits had formed a loose group, drawn together by shared suffering and mutual respect. You're biologically programmed to recognize when you're outmatched. Your fear response is your body literally telling you to stop. Why don't you listen? Marcus looked up from the tactical manual he was studying. Always studying. Because fear is information, not instruction. It tells me the situation is dangerous, but I get to decide what to do about it. That's insane, Sharika rumbled. The predator had become something of a friend to Marcus, bonded through countless sparring sessions. Your body has millions of years of evolution telling you to run, and you just ignore it. Not ignore, acknowledge, then overcome. Marcus smiled that strange human smile. Besides, you know what's scarier than facing danger? Living with the knowledge that you ran when others needed you. Kreeg, who'd become Marcus's regular training partner, nodded slowly. The human fights fear with different fear. Fear of failure, over fear of pain. Something like that, Marcus agreed. I watched this exchange with fascination. The human was teaching aliens about courage, not by being fearless, but by being afraid and acting despite it. There was a lesson there that I hadn't encountered in 30 years of instruction. Month 2 brought advanced weapons training. This was where I expected Marcus to struggle. Galactic weaponry was designed for species with faster reflexes, better aim, stronger grips. The recoil alone, from a heavy plasma cannon, could break human bones. Marcus approached it like everything else. He studied the physics, learned the math, and adapted his technique. I can't outdraw Vela 3, he explained during a tactical discussion. Her reaction time is literally 10 times faster than mine, so I don't try. I preposition, I anticipate. I'm already aiming where the target will be before she's even seen it. Predictive targeting, Beckring mused. Most species rely on reactive accuracy. You're using probabilistic positioning. I'm cheating, Marcus corrected with a grin. But efficiently. The strategy worked. During combat exercises, Marcus rarely got the first shot, but he often got the only shot that mattered. Because while faster species were reacting to where enemies were, he was shooting where they were going to be. How do you know where they'll move? I asked after watching him nail 3 targets in rapid succession, each shot fired before the target had fully appeared. Tactics are patterns, sir. Everyone has tells. The way they lean before moving, the direction their weapon points, the terrain that offers best cover. You just have to read the situation. Just, I repeated, as if analyzing a dozen variables in combat conditions was simple. But for humans, apparently it was. Their brains had evolved to track wounded prey across vast distances, to notice the bent grass blade and the disturbed soil that indicated passage. That same pattern recognition wetware made them terrifying tactical analysts. The turning point came during the final month. The war games. This was the ultimate test. All 44 remaining recruits divided into 2 teams fighting a multi-day campaign across varied terrain with limited resources and realistic casualty mechanics. Lose your simulated life, and you sat out the rest of the exercise. It was designed to test everything we'd taught them. Leadership, tactics, endurance, adaptability, and teamwork. I divided them carefully. Thornik led one team, a powerhouse of raw capability and direct assault tactics. Vala 3 led the other, built for speed and precision strikes. Marcus was placed on Vala 3's team, not as a leader but as a strategic advisor. Why is the human in a planning role? Vakrin questioned. My decision. Should he not be in the field using his combat skills? Watch and learn, I told him. The war games began at dawn. Thornik's team immediately pushed for territorial control using their superior strength to seize key positions. It was a solid strategy. Control the high ground, fortify positions, force the enemy to attack uphill. Vala 3's team scattered like leaves in wind. It looked like chaos. Vakrin actually laughed. Then the sabotage started. Thornik's supply depot exploded at midnight. No one had seen anyone approach. The guards swore they'd maintain perfect vigilance. But somehow, charges had been placed on the ammunition stores. Impossible, Thornik growled, reviewing the security footage. Nothing got past our sensors, but someone had. Someone who understood that sensors had blind spots, that guards had patterns, that even the best security had a rhythm you could exploit if you were patient enough. Marcus had spent 2 hours crawling through mud, moving so slowly that motion sensors never triggered. He'd studied the guard rotations for a full day before making his move, and when he finally placed those charges he was already gone before anyone knew to look. This is not honorable combat, one of Thornik's team protested. This is asymmetric warfare, Marcus replied over the open channel. And honor is a luxury the weaker side can't afford. The games continued. Every time Thornik's team established a strong point it was undermined, supply lines interdicted, communication relays sabotaged, sentries found unconscious with no memory of what hit them. He's fighting like prey, Hasraka observed. He'd been eliminated early and was watching with me from the observation deck. Striking from hiding, never committing to direct confrontation. He's fighting smart, I corrected. He knows his team can't win a straight fight, so he's ensuring there is no straight fight. On day 3 Thornik's team was exhausted. They'd barely slept, constantly watching for attacks that came from unexpected angles. Their supply situation was critical. Their morale was shattered, and they still had superior numbers and firepower. That's when Marcus launched the actual assault. But it wasn't his team that attacked. It was Thornik's own paranoia. Marcus had spent 3 days conditioning them to expect ambushes from everywhere. So when Vala 3's team made a loud, obvious frontal assault, Thornik assumed it was a distraction. He held back forces, expecting the real attack from behind. There was no attack from behind. The frontal assault was the real attack, and it rolled through Thornik's divided, exhausted, paranoid forces like a plasma wave through paper. The war games ended with Vala 3's team victorious, having suffered minimal casualties while eliminating a numerically superior force. I still don't understand, Thornik said during the after-action review. He wasn't angry, just genuinely confused. We were stronger, we should have won. You were stronger, Marcus agreed. But we were more determined, and we were willing to fight in ways you never anticipated. Dirty tactics, someone muttered. Effective tactics, Vakrin interjected. In real combat there are no referees to complain to. There is only survival and failure. I watched the assembled recruits process this lesson. They'd all grown up in cultures where combat had rules, where strength determined outcomes, where the better warrior won. Humans had grown up in a universe that didn't care about fairness, where the weak either got clever or got extinct. You fight like you have nothing to lose, Vala 3 said to Marcus. Like every battle is your last stand. Marcus shrugged. Because it might be. Humans don't have redundant organs or regeneration or armored hides. When we get hurt, we stay hurt. When we die, we stay dead. So we fight like our lives depend on winning. Because they do. The graduate ceremony was held on the final day. Of the 47 recruits who'd started, 41 were graduating. Normal attrition rate. What wasn't normal was the human standing among them. Not only having survived but having fundamentally changed how his fellow graduates thought about combat. Commander Xylos, the station administrator, addressed the graduates. You came here as representatives of your species. You leave as defenders of the galaxy. You have learned tactics, strategy, and the arts of war. But more importantly, you have learned to fight alongside species different from yourselves. His gaze fell on Marcus. Some of you were unexpected additions to our program. Some were doubted. Some were dismissed as too weak, too fragile, too limited by biology to succeed. The commander's mandibles clicked, and what I'd learned was his version of a smile. Those assessments were proven incorrect, not because biology was irrelevant, but because determination proved more powerful than genetics. After the ceremony, Vala 3 approached me. Instructor Karvoth, I need to ask you something. Speak. When Marcus first arrived, you knew, didn't you? You knew what humans were capable of. I considered lying. Pride suggested I should claim foresight, but honesty won out. No, I admitted. I thought he'd wash out in a week. I thought his species was too weak, too limited, too prey-like to ever become warriors. Then what changed? I stopped measuring him by what he was and started watching what he did. I looked across the hall where Marcus was accepting congratulations from Kreeg and HFY. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest or toughest, but they're the most stubborn damn species I've ever encountered. They simply refuse to accept that they're outmatched. Villa 3's optical sensors focused on the human. Do you think other species can learn that? That refusal to quit? Some might. But for humans, it's not learned. It's fundamental. They're a species that looked at a planet full of things bigger and meaner and better armed than them, and decided they owned it anyway. They're apex predators who got there through sheer bloody-minded persistence. That sounds terrifying. It is. I agreed. But I'm very glad they're on our side. The celebration continued into the evening. I found Marcus standing alone on observation deck looking out at the stars, having second thoughts. Graduate? I asked. No, sir. Just thinking about home. About Earth. Missing it? A little. But also grateful for it. He gestured at the viewport. All those species out there, they evolved on worlds where they were the biggest or fastest or deadliest thing around. They never had to struggle for survival the way we did. They never had to overcome disadvantages. And you think that makes humans better? Not better. Different. We're not used to being the strongest. We're used to fighting uphill. Maybe that's our real advantage. Everyone else is learning how to fight from weakness. We've been doing it our whole evolutionary history. I processed that. He was right, of course. Every other species in the GDI had been their planet's dominant life form. They'd evolved assuming they were the peak, the pinnacle the best nature could produce. Humans had evolved knowing they weren't, knowing that nature had made things tougher, faster, more lethal than them. And they'd survived anyway. Thrived anyway. Conquered their entire world anyway. What happens now, sir? Marcus asked. Where does the GDI send us? That depends on your specialty selection. You've qualified for advanced tactical training, special operations, or command school. He nodded slowly. Special operations. I want to keep learning. Keep adapting. I thought you might say that. I handed him a data chip. Your first assignment brief. Read it carefully. He took the chip, curiosity evident on his features. Can you tell me what it is? Reconnaissance mission. Deep behind enemy lines. High risk, low support. Minimal backup. His expression didn't change. No fear. No hesitation. Just calm acceptance. When do I leave? 2 days, enough time to rest and prepare. I'll be ready, sir. I didn't doubt it. The human who'd stumbled off that transport 4 months ago, soft and weak and seemingly doomed, was gone. In his place stood something far more dangerous. A warrior who understood his limitations and fought in spite of them. A tactician who turned weakness into strategy. A soldier who simply refused to quit. As I watched him study the mission brief, I realized something else. We hadn't just trained Marcus Webb. We demonstrated to the entire galaxy what humans were capable of when properly motivated, and that was going to change everything. Sir, Marcus looked up from the data chip. This mission is listed as extremely high casualty probability, 93% projected loss rate based on previous attempts. I confirmed. 3 teams have tried, none succeeded. Command is considering it impossible. A slow smile spread across his face. That terrifying human smile that I'd learned meant they were about to do something completely insane. Perfect, he said. Impossible is where we do our best work. I believed him. Against all logic, all evidence, all statistical probability, I believed this fragile, limited, biologically inferior human would somehow succeed where stronger species had failed. Because that's what humans did. They looked at impossible and treated it like a personal challenge. The universe had spent billions of years proving that the strong survived and the weak perished. Humans had spent millions of years proving that determination mattered more than strength. I didn't know who would win that argument, but I was absolutely certain it was going to be entertaining to watch. As Marcus headed off to prepare, Vekring joined me at the viewport. So, he said, think he'll survive the mission? Honestly? No idea, but you assigned it to him anyway. Because if anyone can pull it off, it's going to be someone too stubborn to acknowledge when they're beaten. We stood there in silence watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was about to learn what the Galactic Defense Initiative had learned over the past 4 months. Humans were terrifying, not because they were strong, but because they refused to accept that they weren't. And that refusal, that absolute rejection of their own limitations made them the most dangerous species in the known universe. Every alien had believed the human was helpless. They were wrong. Not because Marcus Webb was secretly powerful, but because helplessness for humans was just another obstacle to overcome. And humans were very, very good at overcoming obstacles. I smiled. A gesture I'd unconsciously picked up from too much time around the human. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but it was about to find out.